The US has a thing called the 25-year rule, which means that cars that weren't previously meant for the US market can be imported after 25 years. Well, it's 2021, which means that we can now import cars from 1996. So we got a little bit of everything, a little bit of JDM flared European cars, Australia. We've put together a list of the most exciting cars that you are able to import today. I'm James, and this is the D-List. Before we get into the list, I just want to say that importing a car is always going to be very, very complicated. It's a messy process, and each state has their own regulations that can make registration that much more difficult. The easiest way to do it is to find a broker that you can trust. I'm going to put the link to a couple of guys who helped us make this episode down in the description below. Also, 1996 was the first year that OBD2 was required in US vehicles, which can make passing emissions even harder. Okay, so with that out of the way,
let's get into it.
Mitsubishi Lancer Evo 4.
The Evo has always been a tuner darling and a favorite among enthusiasts. We didn't get them in the States until 2003 with the Evo 8. So the older non-US spec models just had that little sprinkle of fairy dust that made them just a little bit more special. Forbidden fruit tastes that much more delicious. Mitsubishi gave the 4th gen Evo an updated aero package with thick, huge big old rally fog lights in the front bumper, and also got a brand new bigger turbo, which means I'm more power, baby. First one of the year. This was also the first Evo to have something called active yaw control that controls torque to each individual wheel. The Evo 4 was also the first of the breed to really lock in some W's on the World Rally stage. So, racing heritage. The first 3 Evos are already old enough to import, and we did a bumper to bumper on one a while ago, but now it's the Evo 4's turn, starting in August of this year. But James, it's 2021. I want my Evo now. It's been 25 years. Well, you gotta slow your roll, boss. Let me explain something about the 25-year import rule. It's not as simple as you think. That's just how laws work. That's why you have to have a degree to be a lawyer. This particular law says that the VIN actually has to be 25 years old, not just the model year. So even though the car is technically a 1996, each individual car has to be 25 years old before you can bring it in. And the Evo 4 didn't start getting built until August of 96. So if you have a car from November of 96, you can't bring it over here till November.
Nissan STAGEA.
In September of 96, Nissan introduced the STAGEA to compete with the Subaru Legacy. It's kind of like an R33 SKYLINE station wagon, which is tight AF. Subaru came out with the STI, so Nissan gave us the STAGEA RS4. The RS4 was a performance version of this wagon, and this thing is practically a full-on Blastoid, okay? We're talking all-wheel drive. We're talking turbo. We're talking RB25. This is starting to sound like the sickest wagon ever, except it's not, because there's an even sicker STAGEA called the Altec 260 RS. It's got numbers and letters in it, which means it's sick. And it came with an RB26 DETT, the same engine from the Nissan GT-R. It's like Godzilla with a backpack.
Renault Sport Spanner.
The Renault Sport Spadea is everything you want from a sports car, and by that, no features at all. It's got no power steering, no radio, no AC, no trunk. It doesn't even come with a freaking roof. The Sport Spadea was directly inspired by Renault's Alpine A110 sports car from the 60s and 70s and was a track-ready road car. January of 96 was the first year that the Sport Spadea was made, and it's actually the only year that this car came with windshield. It's got butterfly doors, just like a McLaren Senna. Also, just like a Senna, the Sport Spadea starts with an S. It only has 150 horsepower, but it also weighs only 2,000 pounds. So just make sure that you measure your legs before you order one of these, because it looks very small, and there's nothing worse than ordering a pair of pants that don't fit, except for ordering a car that doesn't fit. Next up, we have one of the grosser names of any car ever. The Toyota.
That's not gross.
STARLET.
That one actually sounds pretty cool.
GLANZA. That's right. This car is named the GLANZA. The GLANZA V to be more specific, and it's a badass version of one of my favorite cars, Toyota's compact city car, the STARLET, one of the best names ever. The GLANZA came out in January of '96, so you can get one today, and it checked every box that you would want to check if you're looking for a fun little hatchback. It's got turbo, it's got an LSD, it's got a really fun body kit. It's like a smaller, hotter, hatchier version of an old Civic. The chassis of this car did come to the US in 1997, but it didn't have a turbo, and it was called the Toyota Echo. You may remember them. It's the total opposite of a hot hatchback. It's a cold hunchback. The next car is a mouthful of Vegemite, the HSV VS GTS-R. Again, bunch of letters, bunch of numbers, it means it's gonna be sick. And it's an even more jacked up version of the Holden Commodore V6, and it was only made for 1 year. This thing, it's like ugly hot. Under the hood is a beefy 5.7 liter LS1 that the Australians call the Stroker. And it came with a huge rear wing and some seriously period correct 3-spoke wheels. And most importantly, you could only get it in yellow. More specifically, XU3 yellow. Holden only made 85 of these Buff Joeys, so if you're gonna import one, you're looking at close to a $200,000 price tag. All of a sudden, doesn't really seem worth it. For a 1996 car with an LS1, for that price tag, you could buy 10 Catfish Camaros and still have enough money for 30 more Camaros. In 1996, TVR made a beautiful V8 powered sports car called the Cabrera. This was the very first car that TVR put their own V8 engine into. But even though you can import a Cabrera starting this year, it's not the car on this list, because they're actually talking about a bizarre Swedish copycat, literally called the Joskar Indigo 3000. So basically, there's this dude, let's call him Yas, and he looked at what TVR was doing and said, Yas, that's what I want to do. So Yas basically went down the Swedish car aisle in the parts supermarket and grabbed all of his favorite bits. He got a 6-cylinder 24-valve Volvo engine, Volvo seats, Volvo rear suspension, Volvo transmission, and a gas tank from Saab. This thing looks like the sports car for the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And starting in March, my birthday's in March, by the way, you can snag one of only 44 of these bad boys that were ever built. So if you can find one and afford it, get me it for my birthday. We want it. What do you think was the most expensive Japanese car that was made in 1996? Dead wrong! It was a huge 4-cylinder, diesel-powered, military-inspired SUV that at the time was $100,000. It's basically a Hummer H1 for the Japanese military, and it's called the Mega Cruiser. It's got 6 seats, which is 2 more than a wimpy-ass Hummer H1. It's got full-time 4-wheel drive and 4-wheel steering, but even though it's about as bare bones as it gets, you're gonna have to drop some serious quan if you want one today. Like $100,000 worth of quan. Toyota technically started making them in 1995 for the military, but didn't start selling them to the public until 1996. And they only made 133 for civilians. And you're gonna have to wait till October to bring one here. I've seen one in person, they're nuts.
The Lotus ELISE.
The Lotus ELISE has been on sale in the US since 2005, but we never got the first version that came out in August of 1996. This teeny tiny little baby car redefined what a sports car could be and was the epitome of the Lotus mentality of simplify and add lightness. The ELISE was designed to be a 4-wheeled version of the Ducati sports bikes of the day. It's 25 centimeters shorter than a Miata, but it's wider, which made this car one of the best handling cars in the world. This is another one that you're gonna wanna make sure to take butt measurements before buying, because it's a small boy. In general, you should just know how wide your butt is, in case you have to escape.
MITSUBISHI LEGNUM VR4.
This one has a gross name too. I don't get it. LEGNUM. But this is another awesome JDM party dad wagon, and it's a bit of part spin special. It's the station wagon version of the Galant. It shares the same all-wheel drive platform that's in the Evo that I mentioned earlier, and it's got the twin-turbo V6 from the 3000 GT. Yeah. You can start buying these bad boys in June, just in time for summer, and surprisingly, it's one of the cheaper cars on this list. There's a guy in Canada that imported his for like $8,000. And just for your info, Canada doesn't have a 25-year rule, they have a 15-year rule.
But of course, the Toyota Classic.
I know what you're saying. This thing isn't 25 years old. It's like 100 years old. Dead wrong, muchacho. Toyota made the Classic in 1996 to celebrate the 60th anniversary of its first passenger car. It is in essence a luxury Toyota built on the chassis of a Tacoma. Only 100 of these cars were built, and the original sale price for the car was $75,000, which seems really expensive for a joke. And somehow they can be found for around $30,000 today. I don't know. Biggest benefit of buying one of these things is that no one will be driving what you're driving, except maybe in my favorite show, Downtown Abbey, which is about a guy who has a guy dress him 3 times a day so he can eat food with his daughters. You know me, you know I love me a golf. Great sport, great car, and to celebrate all of us dubbers, those wacky Germanites came out with a celebratory model for their most celebrated car. I'm talking about the 20th anniversary GTI. The anniversary special came with red accents and heritage-inspired design elements like red seatbelts, red and gray checkered upholstery, bigger 16-inch BBS wheels, and a 2-liter 16-valve 4-banger. Also, a little red button on the e-brake that looks exactly like a dog's pee-pee. It's a little confusing because the US also got a 20th anniversary version of the Mark IV GTI in 2003, but that was to celebrate 20 years of being in the US market. The one I'm talking about today is a Mark III, the best gen, and it was made to celebrate the original 1976 GTI that wasn't sold in America. It's very confusing. Them's German cars for you, boy. Never seen so many plastic screws in my life. We have reached the end of the list, and we got a real banger for you babies. It's a Nissan, it's a Skyline, it's a GT-R, AKA as the best man at my wedding, Larry the Cable Guy calls it the Get Her Done. But on top of that, it's a very, very special one that was only produced in May of 1996.
Le Nissan Skyline R33 GT-R LM Limited.
In 1996, Nissan entered the GT1 class at the 24 Hours of Le Mans with the badass wide-body R33 race car. It wasn't able to compete with the Ferrari F40s and McLaren F1s, so Nissan withdrew from the season. But to celebrate the fact that they tried at Le Mans, Nissan built 188 LM limited GTRs for the public that were directly inspired by the Le Mans race cars. They had a vented hood, upgraded front lip, carbon fiber wing, with a gurney flap, and they only came in championship blue, even though they quit. And if you're one of those haters that says the R33 is just the fat middle child of the Skyline family, I've got news for you, pal. The fat middle child is the best child. They're funnier and they're more reliable because they learn from their big brothers and sisters. They're wider, which makes them more stable and better to handle, and because of their shape, they're more aerodynamic, and I think they're better looking, all of which is true in the R33. I love an R33 Skyline. I would love one. I want to give a huge thanks to Jamie Orr and Sean Morris for really helping us in the research of this video. We couldn't have done it without you guys. I'm going to put the link to both of their websites in the description below. Both of them are great. I actually got my Golf from Orchid Europe. To find out more about cars we never got, check out this episode of the D-List. I love you.